What you want, when you want it, where you want it. This is The Mesh.
We all know May is National Barbecue Month, and Memorial Day is the unofficial start of the summer cook-off season. And whoa, hey, May 28th is National Brisket Day. A short story long, it's time to fan the barbecue flames. It's time to gather with friends, and maybe it's time to recognize that every get-together is better with the right beverages, especially if they have a few bubbles in them. So today, we're combining all that good stuff and talking bubbles and brisket with the authority on food and beverages in North Carolina. It's Max Trujillo from the NC Food and Beverage Podcast, which is getting ready to hold its 5th annual Bubbles and Brisket Festival on June 7th, Smoky Hollow in Raleigh. Max, welcome to the Low and Slow Barbecue Show.
Well, thank you for having me on, Chigger. If I had half the amount of energy that you have, I would be doing my job way better than I normally do.
We can talk about that energy after the show. I'll tell you how I get there. It's a little known Alabama secret. And I can't wait to find out more about your cool event. And really, it's the first of the kind in this state. And we're also going to talk about the Food and Beverage Podcast. And importantly, we're going to get Max's take on barbecue in the state of North Carolina. I know he's reviewed and visited some of our favorite places like John G's. But first, a quick reminder to our audience, visit our website at lowslowbbqshow.com. We've got our complete library of pitmaster interviews, blogs, and of course, the sign up for our weekly newsletter, The Lowdown. It hits your inbox every Tuesday with the latest Carolina barbecue news, food truck stops, and events like the Bubbles and Brisket Party coming up in Raleigh. Again, June 7th. So, Max, let's get into it. What is Bubbles and Brisket, and how did you get started with that?
Yeah, man. Thank you for asking. Bubbles and Brisket. So it did become an event based off of a conversation that we had on my podcast. My co-host and I, back in the day, we were having a conversation with a pitmaster, and my co-host then, Matt Weiss, and I, we're both sommeliers, right? We're both fancy wine guys. I'm from Los Angeles. He's from New York. We both find ourselves living in North Carolina, and we love the food culture out here. I'm a huge barbecue fan. But as we were talking with James Sampson of Corner Boys Barbecue about 5-6 years ago, and I just brought up the idea. I looked at Matt and I said, "Hey, man, if money wasn't an option, what would you say would be the best thing to pair with brisket?" And I said, everybody drinks sweet tea or beer, and that's obvious. I said, but what do you think? And we were both kind of thinking about it, and we're like, you know what? Let's be honest. Champagne would be the best thing to have. The crisp acidity, the effervescence, kind of that nutty yeastiness that comes through. Yeah. You mix it with brisket, which is like got that perfect umami flavor of sweet, salty. It's got that like crispiness, saltiness, all of it together. When you wash down that brisket with champagne, it's like for one, it clears and cleans your palate, but it also is so refreshing that it makes you want to eat more. And so then you eat and you drink more. Yeah. And because we had that, we were like, oh, bubbles. That sounds good. Bubbles and brisket. Oh, bubbles and brisket. Like, man, somebody should do an event about that. And then we're like, heck, we should do that event. So
right.
We did.
Yeah. And so you did, and now you're into the 5th one. And tell me, first, for this year's event, who all you got going to be there? Who are the pit masters and the beverages that you're featuring this year?
Yeah, man, I'm glad you asked. So we have some known pit masters, but we also, part of what I like is getting chefs that are not barbecue people, that are, your typical savory chef, to just kind of throw in their version of what they want to do. So we've got traditional amazing barbecue. I think you may have already had Mr. Nick Dampf of Dampf Good Barbecue on the podcast, or
not yet, but know of him for sure. Yep.
Okay, cool. He's a good friend of mine. I will definitely get you in touch with him. So they're going to be on. He's traditional, kind of like a Texas barbecue, I'd say, doing out here in Cary, North Carolina. And then we have Midwood Smokehouse, which has a few locations out there in Charlotte. They have one in Raleigh as well. So Matthew Berry, who's the chef. But we have an English chef, David Ellis of Figulina, which if you pay attention to James Beard Awards, you'll note that he was on the short list of nominees for best new restaurant in America, not just in the region, but the whole country.
Yeah.
And he does a pasta restaurant. It's not an Italian restaurant. He makes handmade pasta and does it very intently. Like, this guy is a master. And so I'm going to have him go on a TV show while we promote it in a couple of weeks, where he's going to do like large raviolos, but with smoked brisket inside. And he's making little pasta dishes. I've got a guy doing pizza. He does V pizza. It's like your traditional Neapolitan, but he's going to have brisket on the pizzas, and he's going to be fire roasting them or fire baking them to order at the space with a big traveling wood fire oven.
Wow.
And then then I've got a couple other friends, like a great caterer in the area, Donovan's Dish, Jill Donovan. She is fantastic, and her team. So they're going to throw down. I once owned a restaurant, and my chef then, Henry Ramos, is now the chef of a fancy, swanky rooftop restaurant in downtown Raleigh called High Rail. So he's going to come in and make some food. And then another gentleman, kind of more of a fine dining chef, Justin Wright, who used to work for Vivian Howard for so many years, now has a restaurant in Greenville, North Carolina called Julep. And he's making brisket tamales, which I'm part Mexican, and this is like the way I grew up baking tamales. So I'm super excited to see what he's doing. But there's a whole lot more when it comes to the beverage side of things. My good friend John runs Avant-Garde, which is a wine distributor, and he's paired up with Raleigh Wine Shop, and they're going to do about 8 different wines, where some old world, some new world. We're talking champagne, but we're also talking Cremant, Cava, Prosecco, just traditional American white sparkling wine. And then we're not silly, it's not just all champagne. We're also throwing in some beer. So we've got Outlaw Brewing, we've got Hatchet, we've got Trophy, Crank Arm. These are all great local breweries in the area that are all dropping off their wares. And then we have a local distillery, Liberty and Plenty, coming out of Durham, female-owned Durham distillery, which is really nice. And they are going to set up and make sparkling cocktails. So when you buy a ticket, you come in, you get all the food that you want. You just kind of keep going up to all these little booths. And then you also can get tastes of all of the beer, the wine, the cocktails. And then we also have full-blown, like, if you want a pint of beer, you can buy a pint of beer or a full glass of wine, or buy bottles at discount to go. And like, there's a lot of fun things that we're doing.
Sure.
We've got a DJ 9 who, if you know Waka Flocka Flame, he's his DJ, and he's going to be throwing down like 90s hip hop the whole time, and some fun surprises as well as we go on.
Yeah, wow, that sounds like a great event. And of course, you guys are doing it not just for everybody to get together and eat and drink and all that's good for sure, but I understand there's a little bit of a charitable side about that. Tell me a little bit about, the barbecue for the cause, as we like to call it.
Exactly, man. Yeah. So we're doing it for Project Skyline, which is out there in Spruce Pine, North Carolina, which is not too far from, say, Asheville, if you will. And we recently had Mr. John Sealbinder on as a guest recently. He's the owner of the Skyline Inn, but he also owns restaurants in Raleigh. And he's just been a buddy of mine for years. I've known him. But he told this amazing story of how once Hurricane Helene came in and devastated all of West North Carolina, there were certain pockets in certain areas that didn't get destroyed, and his inn was one of them. And so it ended up becoming like a way station and a place where he has 17 rooms, so people could come in, and first responders were coming in. They were able to get cell service out there. It was like this one magical place where business could still, thrive. And he brought a bunch of generators. He has like a little bit of a military background, so he kind of knew how to be strong during a crisis, and he ended up being this great leader in the space. But they need volunteers and they need funding, and it's going to be a huge rebuild, obviously, for West North Carolina. So we're going to donate a portion of all the proceeds that we bring in from ticket sales to support his cause, because Western North Carolina and the surrounding areas definitely could use it.
Yeah, definitely a lot of needs still existing in those areas affected by Hurricane Helene. So we'd love to hear that you guys are supporting that. Apart from that, there's a lot of barbecue events that are really, especially the last few years, that have started to emerge, in the Charlotte area, in the Raleigh and the Triangle there. Obviously Greenville, South Carolina and Wilmington, everybody's got a food event going on right now. I know you guys have been doing it for a while. How do you feel like Bubbles and Brisket is maybe different from some of these other events?
Well, I think, my buddies have always kidded around and like I had a nickname for a while, Fancy Max. I'm always a little fancy, being the wine guy and coming from a big city and California boy. Like, I don't know. I've always just liked nice things. I've worked in fine dining. I worked for Wolfgang Puck for years and, worked at a lot of kind of swanky spots. And so I think I look at this event kind of in that realm, where you could be, a place that might have, peanut shells or sawdust on the ground and make it real simple and easy. But that's not this. This is, we're doing it at Smoky Hollow in downtown Raleigh, which is a relatively new development. It's really beautiful, but it's polished. Right now it sits, it's like a corridor where there are restaurants all around, and the restaurants that are there are swanky. They're nice. Like Madre is this, I guess you'd consider it kind of like a world food, Mediterranean, maybe a little. And then you've got the Crunkleton, which just opened up, which is almost kind of like a steakhouse with oysters. Midwood Smokehouse, who I mentioned, who's going to be a part of it, they have their barbecue pit there, but even their place, I wouldn't say is like lowbrow and simple. It's like, it's nice. It's like fancy kind of. So the whole place and the vibe, it's like, I would put it this way. This is a great place to take a date to. This is like a great place to impress because we're going to be drinking and eating like really good high-end quality products and kind of, bougie it up a little bit. Why not?
Yeah, I like that, bougie it up. And of course, if you go to the website, NCFB Podcast, you can get all the details about the event, the Bubbles and Brisket event, as well as your podcast. And we're going to talk a little bit about your podcast here in just a moment, but I give you just, a chance to talk a little bit more about these pitmasters. It seems like you get a rotating cast of them. You don't have the same guys every year. I know Matthew Berry, you mentioned, we've had him on the podcast, and I go to visit your site and I see Brandon Shepard. I see Jake Wood from Lawrence Barbecue. Some of the other guys that we've had on the show. How do you get people to be involved from the pitmaster side? And you really feel like you need to twist any arms there?
Yeah, look, I would have loved to have had Jake Wood on. I'm actually going to be shucking oysters personally at his event next weekend at Getting Piggy with It.
Yeah.
And he's got so much going on. Believe me, I asked him, but that guy's got a million things happening. He's about to open up a new business as well. So, but he's been, I think he did it 2 of the 4 years we've already done it. And so, we're all just buddies out here. I would say doing this podcast and also practicing what I preach in the sense that I also have been a general manager. I've worked on the line. I cook. I amateurly smoke meats as well. And, but doing it all, I think, is part of the reason that, we all like to kind of work together and do this stuff. I have, like Matt Register of Southern Smoke Barbecue, really good friend. He's been a part of it. My ex-wife, she shot his cookbook. She's a phenomenal photographer. And so there was a nice connection there. We try to promote, the whole point of the NCF&B podcast was, like an all ships rise mentality. If we speak a lot about these great restaurants, then hopefully they get a little bit more visibility and a little bit more business. And in turn, maybe more people listen to my show. And so we all kind of help each other out. And so I think that's what it's like. And there's not really a quid pro quo in any of this. It's really just all support. We're just doing it because we enjoy it and we like working with each other. It's the beautiful part about the food and beverage industry.
Yeah, win-win for everybody involved. So we've talked about the podcast. So let's get a little bit more into that podcast piece. Tell me a little bit about how you got it started and when did you get started?
Yeah, so our first episode dropped December 1st, 2016. And so what is that? We're like 8 years in, getting close to our 9th year. which is wild. I will say because my partner at the time, Matt Weiss, and I, we started it together. He and I have been friends for years. Like I mentioned before, he's from New York. I'm from LA. I moved here first to Raleigh, North Carolina, and then he followed. His wife was pregnant. They were about to have a kid, but he was living in Manhattan. He's like, dude, I don't want to raise a kid in Manhattan. And I had already had 2 children. And I said, yeah, I didn't want to raise my kids in LA. So I moved for a quality of life type of thing. And so did he. And in that process of him coming down here, I was like, dude, if you're going to live out here, we definitely have to do something. But we also were broke. So it's not like we really could open up a restaurant. Well, that was kind of the original idea. But I was like, I have this music background. I went to school for audio engineering and I play guitar and, like whatever. And I said, I love podcasts. I could easily produce one of these things. And, you and I, we have the gift of the gab. We should just do this. And while I was working at a restaurant in Raleigh, the chef that I was working with was friends to everybody, Mr. Scott James, who's now the chef at the Angus Barn, which many will know is kind of like probably the most established restaurant in North Carolina. And he's just a friend to everybody. And being such a good guy, he introduced me to everyone. So it wasn't long before I got connected to every cool chef and brewer and distiller and everybody in town. And thanks to Scott. And so when Matt moved down here from New York, we started recording. We ultimately did 6 episodes before we released them. And I don't know, Chigger, like if you did this or any way you get started, but like we didn't just want to like do an episode and release it. We thought, well, let's do a few and make sure we're not total idiots and make sure that let's hope that it's interesting, And so we recorded 6. Funny enough, I mentioned the Crunkleton as a restaurant that's going to be over here in Smoky Hollow. Gary Crunkleton, who's the owner of that place, was our 6th person that we ever recorded with. And upon recording with him, he's such a great guy, super funny, and knows a ton about like liquor and bourbon because the original Crunkleton is a bar. That we felt confident. We were like, you know what? These are good shows. I think these are funny. They're entertaining, educational. Let's do it. Let's release them. So on December 1st in 2016, we released 6 shows, I believe 6, maybe 7 shows all at once. And then we started recording and, we banked a couple, but then we just got on a rhythm. And I will say this with pride, we released an episode every Thursday for the next 8 years and never missed a Thursday. Wow. We released, we're at about 500 and some odd episodes until last fall. And Matt and I were buddies, but we decided to split and go our separate ways. And he's doing a more wine-centric show, oddly enough named The Wine-Centric Show. And I remained with the North Carolina Food and Beverage Podcast. So kind of went separate ways. There was a couple things that I wanted to do creatively that we weren't doing, and he wanted to go a little bit more beverage. And so that's how we did it. And now, I don't record in the daytime anymore. I usually do it at night over a beer or a glass of wine. It's a little bit more relaxed. It's one-on-one. I'd like to say it's not an episode of Joe Rogan. It's not, 3 hours long, but I'd say the format is a lot more relaxed. And it's just a conversation. We don't even sometimes know what we're going to get into, and we just start talking. And like today's episode with Gray Shipley of Shipley Farms Beef, we talked about pasture raised, cows and pigs, but then we got into Robert Kennedy's whole mentality of the Maha movement for what it means for food and health of food, and kind of like got political. But then we talked about the western part of the state, North Carolina, talking about the rebuild because that's where his farm is located. So it's good, but it's just cool, relaxed, fun. And really, like for me, the podcast is like almost just like my pastime. It's like it's my, like, I guess it's a hobby. I mean, I get paid every now and then for it, so that's cool. but it's a fun gig, I like it.
Cool. So again, 10 years, nearly 10 years, 500 plus episodes. I'm sure you've had a ton of guests, and I want to ask you to pick one. I've scrolled down the list and I'm at ncfbpodcast.com, and I've scrolled down, and there's just so many episodes. I see a lot of those barbecue guys that we've had on and that are, big names around the state. But I want to ask you, outside the barbecue or maybe including the barbecue, what's one thing that people should know about North Carolina and our food and beverage scene here in 2025?
Well, it's funny. We intentionally didn't do a barbecue episode for the longest time. I think it took about eight episodes or 8 months before we even recorded anyone that was like a quote unquote barbecue guy. Mainly because we knew we're like, look, it's so obvious to go barbecue when you're in North Carolina, but our whole thing was like, there's so much more about the food culture in North Carolina that people aren't understanding. So we didn't want to, it was kind of like this idea of not being rote and not being so like direct. We were like, yes, I get it. Barbecue, it's pulled pork. It's, it's a noun, not a verb. It's all this, and we were talking about, what those things are. And I learned those things later, but I think in the beginning we were really focused on like chefs and distillers and brewers and the people behind them and kind of the entrepreneurial aspect of like how they turn this creative vision into a dream. And so I really liked the idea of getting more in these like personal, human interest stories, if you will. And learn, I mean, like some of the skill level of some of these chefs that we have out here is I would say is as good as it can get anywhere across the state. Episode 50 that we had was with Chef Ashley Christensen. And if you know your culinary history out here, you'll know that in 2019, she was voted outstanding chef across the country in the James Beard Awards, which is effectively like saying she was like, like she won an Oscar, for cooking,
Right.
And that was a huge moment for us. She is an amazing chef. She's kind of helped redefine the food culture in this area. And she even told us then, she's like, you guys are the storytellers of the food and beverage industry of the state. Keep it going. And we kind of took that and wore that hat and made that kind of our mantra from that point on.
Yeah, that's cool. So right now, what do you feel like is the hottest city for food in North Carolina?
Oh man, it's Charlotte. Charlotte is just kicking everybody's butt right now.
Wow.
I mean, there was so much pride that we had in the Triangle. And in fact, a lot of my Charlotte chef friends, there was always this like, being that I'm here in Raleigh, we'd have this playful, challenge or, we'd go up against each other. But I was in Charlotte. I mean, I go to Charlotte pretty often. But the last few times I was there, I was like, I felt embarrassed about how good Charlotte food is and the scene is. And I'm like, man, what's going on, Raleigh? Now I was dogging Raleigh for a while, but I mean, truth be told, the pandemic didn't help anything, but also we had a lot of riots and the George Floyd situation was pretty intense. And, some cities got it worse than others, and Raleigh got it about as bad as it could be. Our studios in downtown Raleigh, and that building that we're in was lit on fire. Wow. And all the windows were blown out. And that night when the riots were going on, our building manager called the fire department. He's like, hey, our high rise is on fire. You need to send the fire department. And the fire department said, or the dispatch said, unfortunately, because we've deemed this what do they call it? It was like a time of crisis. They can't release fire department because they can't protect themselves. And there was so much violence happening in the street that they just said, we hope your fire suppression systems, like the little sprinklers inside the building, will be sufficient because we can't do anything. Wow. And the guy's like, well, wait, I mean, if this building goes down, all the buildings around are going to go down. They're like, that's why you have fire suppression systems. Let's hope that works. Yeah. And it worked. It actually put it out. And, but the CVS that was down below was completely destroyed. It was first on fire and then second flooded. And it took about 1.5 years before they could even get it back to like where it needed to go. But I would say Raleigh in itself was devastated. And downtown Raleigh is only now, like 5 years later, kind of getting back to where it used to be. And so I think because of that, cities like Charlotte and actually even Cary and Durham have really like kind of taken the lead in all these places, you know.
Sure.
And
do you feel like there's an overlooked food city in our state?
Overlooked. Well, I would say Cary. Cary is a town, you know, if you think about it culturally, Cary has been known to have a lot of people from Asia, India, you know, like from all around that area. And because of it, there's such really great ethnic food. Like you can get really great ramen, Indian food, noodles, sushi. You know, a lot of that comes, I mean, that's my jam. That's what I love to eat mostly. So I find myself going to Cary to get really good food all the time. And it's so close, you know, like it's essentially, you know, it's like if I was living in Los Angeles, it'd be like the difference of going from Santa Monica to Culver City or something.
Right.
These are like little towns near each other. But yeah, I would say, Durham's always been kind of a hipster, cool town, kind of got a cool, funky vibe. But I think Cary's doing it. And I will say, RTP, which, you know, is like the Research Triangle Park.
Yep.
It used to be a dead zone. It used to be like only where business was, you know, like people would just work there. But recently they've been developing a lot of dining establishments. And now there are some crazy cool places like Lawrence Barbecue, the aforementioned Jake Wood. He's there. He's actually moving from there to Cary, but he's still currently there. And he and a lot of other great places are opening up. Katsuji Tanabe just opened up La Taqueria. In my day job, I sell food for a living, and I sell him all of his food, like the raw materials, the raw ingredients, and then he makes delicious tacos. But that town is turning into something. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, and you mentioned Jake and Lawrence Barbecue, and of course Leroy's Taco Shop, and excited for them and their move to Cary, and can't wait to see what they've got going on there. You know, kind of looking towards the future, and I do want to get to barbecue in just a second, but you know, what do you feel like the future holds for the food and beverage industry in North Carolina?
I think we're jamming now. We finally downshifted. We were sputtering for a while. I'd say, you know, it's funny. I wrote an article. I used to write for Raleigh Magazine for years. I did like 60 articles. I was known as the food or the restaurant guru. That was my title. And I just wrote little quips, like 300-word quips about my opinion on food or whatever. Somebody would ask. It was almost like like a Ann Landers or a Dear Abby type of thing where they'd ask me a question and I would answer it, you know. And I wrote an article about beware of the carpetbaggers, because I was kidding around about, you know, a lot of people don't know what that term means, but essentially it's like people that come from another state and make their money in this new town. And a lot of times don't really share that money there. They kind of bring, you know, they get it back to their own hometown or whatever. Right. And what I noticed about 5-6 years ago was there were a lot of celebrity chefs moving in town, opening up restaurants. And that was my thing. I essentially kind of called out like 3 guys, and I took a lot of heat for it. A lot of those chefs were like, "What the heck, man? We're just trying to open up a business. Why are you giving us crap?" But my mentality was, "Hey, man, take it from a carpetbagger myself. I'm not from here. I'm from LA, but I moved here because I love Raleigh and North Carolina, and I wanted to be here rather than to bring LA with me." Yeah. And I would say the only thing that would be kind of like a potentially dangerous or negative is that I could see that this big city mentality, people coming from Atlanta, from New York, from California, from Chicago, that they're bringing all this great food and this culture and all, but they're also bringing $25 cocktails and valet only parking and, you know, and waiting lists and lines to just get a table. You know, we're booked out 2 months in advance. I'm like, what? We're in North Carolina, who's booked out? But those things are now happening. Yeah. So, you know, it's growth. And so you can't get too mad at growth, but you also can kind of get a little regretful that it's not as quaint as it once was.
I definitely can empathize with that here in the Hickory Metro. We've got a little bit of that going on. It's definitely not as quaint as it once was, and there's a lot of frustration growing out of that, but that's a different topic, a different podcast. Let's talk barbecue. How does barbecue fit into the larger North Carolina culinary scene?
Oh, man. Let me at least start with from the outside looking in. When I came in, I knew nothing about barbecue. I mean, like the nicest part is you could say that I've taken my education from zero to wherever it is now. And I mean, I still don't know that much about barbecue, but I do know a fair share. Man, we spent a whole week in Lexington one time to just really get deep into the barbecue culture there. And I almost kind of that's almost like where I like to start. I make I mean no disrespect when I say this to Lexington, but I almost feel like they might be like the most primitive of the style of cooking, only for the fact that they have very specific rules and they also don't sway. I mean, it is what makes them awesome, but it is also what makes them just what exactly they are. So like they only cook shoulders and they only salt their meat. And they don't put pepper on it. And, and it's not whole hog. They're like, I don't do that. And none of these places sell beer or alcohol. And I'm always like, I ask these guys like, if you just got a liquor license, you'd have a line out the door. And they're like, grandma wouldn't like it.
Yep.
I go, well, grandma's not here. They're like, that's the mentality. But they're like, they kid around. They're like, oh, don't get me wrong. We go to our car and we nip on some bourbon in the truck, or like we bring a cooler of beer. So like they're still drinking. They're just not selling it in their business.
Right.
And so like that's a very quaint culture of barbecue. Lexington is. But then, I mean, for me, it's that Eastern North Carolina whole hog barbecue coming out of, like the guys from Skylight, out in Aden, or, Sam Jones. And that's like, when I think of North Carolina barbecue, that's what I think of. But this Californian is a snooty a-hole that wants all the things. And, like where I grew up, we didn't barbecue, we grilled, right? Like we had grills and we'd throw, like I mentioned before, my Hispanic culture, we would just take a Boston butt and we'd cook it down, and then we'd shred it, we'd throw it in the oven and we'd toast it, and we called that carnitas, and it's like, we're like, oh, well, it's almost the same thing. It's just like a Mexican version of pulled pork. But I love beef. And so like we did tri-tip out there in California. And so I started getting like, that's where the brisket thing for me, I'm just like, I'm sorry guys. I love barbecue. I mean, I love pork, but for me, brisket is king. And so I think now barbecue has got to the point in North Carolina, like it's caught up with the rest of the world and the rest of the country, I'd say, in that you can do Texas barbecue or Kansas City barbecue or South Carolina barbecue. And, you can bring all these flavors in, and there are no rules anymore. These, like you got the John G's hat, his brisket is slap your mama good. Like, I mean, there's no way around it. I mean, I will have his pulled pork, but there's no way you're going to wrestle any brisket out of my hands when I'm at John G's. It's like, that's just a must. So, I think that like North Carolina has its firm roots about its whole hog, vinegar based, pulled pork barbecue. But now we are doing everything, and that is a beautiful thing.
Yeah, that was going to be my question. Is that a good thing or a bad thing for Texas and some of these other barbecue flavors to come in here? Sounds like you're on the side of it's a good thing.
I think it's a great thing. It's funny. I'm friends with this guy, Peter, who lives in Edmonton, Canada, and he comes down. I've actually had him on the podcast before. He's like a Canadian pitmaster that is obsessed with North Carolina barbecue. And so it was cool to hear a guy from not even just outside our state, but outside our country that looks towards like what we do with such awe and amazement. And so he'll take like a 2-week vacation and come out here and just stage with pitmasters from all around, like Brandon Shepard or Matthew Register or Sam Jones. And he just soaks it all up. I mean, his barbecue in Edmonton's called Pitt County Barbecue, and Pitt County is
right
in North Carolina County. He does that as an homage. But I like, the reason I mention it is that like it's it's known outside of this area, so much so that like people covet North Carolina barbecue so much. I was in Lyon, France 3 years ago, and Lyon, many consider to be the culinary capital of the world. I think there are more restaurants there than any other city, like per capita. And there was a North Carolina barbecue restaurant in Lyon.
Wow.
And I tried it. It actually wasn't that. It was okay. I was like, guys, nice try. Nice try, French guys. Like you almost got there, but it was good for France, you know. But the fact that like they were able to even attempt to do what we do out here was, I think, a good tell for what we do. It's there's a lot of pride out here with what we do.
Yeah, for sure. I've found that if you go to another state, order their barbecue. Don't order Carolina barbecue. I went to California and I could have gotten the Korean barbecue, but I went with the Carolina barbecue and I regret it. I knew I should have gone a different rate. So we're going to get it close to wrapping it up here, but I do want to ask you, do you have a favorite barbecue place here in North Carolina? I know you mentioned John G's and a few of these other folks, one that's your favorite and maybe one that you haven't tried yet, but you want to.
I mean, you're going to make me like lose friends, you know, because everybody out here is so good at barbecue. I said for years that I thought Jake Wood at Lawrence Barbecue was my favorite. And John G, I mean, he's just far away from me. So I only get his food when I make those specific trips, but he's phenomenal. But I will say, I think my favorite barbecue in the state of North Carolina is Damn Good Barbecue. And he's only open, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. He does all the things. He does Texas style barbecue, but he also does pulled pork and all. But the thing that I really love is that every other Thursday he does a Reuben, and it is unbelievable. He makes his own pastrami. On Fridays, he does his own brisket burger. So he takes all the leftovers from his grind and he makes brisket burgers. And I think it's the best burger I've ever had, regardless of any place I've ever been.
Yeah.
And then on Saturdays, he does tacos. And so my mouth's watering right now just thinking about it. And it also, Nick is a true friend of mine. Like we get along great. And I just think he's a good guy. He's a great family man. I feel like he has a new kid every 6 months. I don't know. I'm always like, wait, how many kids do you have now? 9, 10? I don't know. He's like the Phillip Rivers of barbecue. But he's got his head on shoulder. He's got his head on straight. Even the design of the way he has it is very reminiscent to like a Texas style barbecue in that it's outdoor. It's under like a lean-to, if you will. And he's got smokers everywhere. It feels very Texas energy when you go. And I don't want to stay too much here, but I know he's planning on opening up a really nice new place coming soon. And that is going to blow the doors off of anybody that's doing barbecue in the state.
Wow. Well, we definitely got to get him onto the podcast. Going to wrap it up here, but I do want to ask you, Bubbles and Brisket coming up June 7th, Saturday at Smoky Hollow in Raleigh. If I am anywhere in the state of North Carolina, the Southeast, or the world, why do I need to be there?
Oh man, I think it's for one, the curiosity's sake. I know that somebody listening right now is like, wait, how is that? What does that taste like? I mean, I know I've had I know I've had brisket and I know I've had champagne, but you probably haven't had those two things together. So I think for the curiosity alone, it's a really fun thing to just do those things, that dichotomy of kind of low and high. It's like a David Chang thing where you're having fancy with lowbrow at the same time. So I love that. It's kind of whimsical. It's silly. It's fun. I think that our event is just a little different for those reasons. And I think like you're going to get a different vibe. You could dress nice. Like you could come in kind of like I said, like date night, you go out, you get all dolled up, you come on out. I mean, it's a little different than just putting the ball cap on, jeans and a t-shirt, although you can do that and we're not going to kick you out or anything. There's no dress code, but I like the idea of a fancy barbecue event. And that's kind of what we're doing.
And that, my friends, is the final word from the founder and host of the NC Food and Beverage Podcast. And he's also the good people behind the Bubbles and Brisket event, again, coming up June 7th in Raleigh Smoky Hollow. More details at ncfbpodcast.com. You can click in and find all of his other guests, his other podcasts, more about Bubbles and Brisket. Look, I see you've got new hats on there for $20. I might need to get me one of those. Max, thanks so much for joining our podcast today.
I appreciate it. Thank you much, Chigger. And maybe we'll get you on our show sometime.
Hey, I'd be happy to do it anytime you want. You've been listening to the Low and Slow Barbecue Show. If you like what you hear, please give us a 5-star rating on your favorite podcast stream. Share our podcast with your barbecue-loving friends, and be sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. That's where you can see all the photos and videos of our barbecue adventures and interviews. And, of course, don't forget, when you visit lowslowbbqshow.com, you can sign up for our newsletter and get the latest barbecue news delivered directly to your inbox on Tuesday mornings. Thanks again to our guest today from the NC Food and Beverage Podcast, Max Trujillo. Thanks as well to the whole team at the Mesh.tv network of podcasts, especially our master producer, Andrew Moose. He's also the founder of The Hum, the Hickory's best outdoor concert venue. Get the lineup for the concert season at thehum.live and join us on Saturdays throughout the summer and support live local music. Finally, thank you for listening to the Low and Slow Barbecue Show. Remember, for the best barbecue and the best barbecue podcast, make it low and slow.
You've been listening to The Mesh, an online media network of shows and programs ranging from business to arts, sports to entertainment, music to community. All programs are available on the website as well as through iTunes and YouTube. Check us out online at themesh.tv. Discover other network shows and give us feedback on what you just heard.